Hello everyone, welcome. The final stand today is presenting to you a talk with the youth about climate activism. So today on the panel, we have Anjali Dalmia, Aditya Dubey and Ashit Khandari, who are doing extremely well in their fields of expertise to mitigate the climate change and its consequences. Thank you so much for being a part of this interview. So let's begin. Okay. My first question is, since we are talking about climate activism, my first question is to Ashir Khandari, and that is, how can youth participate in this whole process? How can we do our own bits?
I have always said this, and I really believe it, that I feel that the youth has the most important role in climate activism. We are the ones who will suffer from the consequences. We are the ones who suffer from the consequences, and there's so much we can do, from doing the smallest bits on an individual level to a much more large scale level. There's so much you can do. At your own level, you can mitigate uses of plastic, you can take out petitions, and on a large scale level, you can mobilize protests, you can join protests, learn about climate change, about its effect, who it's affecting the most. And the point is that the basis of the Paris Agreement and climate change is that we have such less time. We don't have time to take action. There's less than 10 years, and if we don't do anything, we won't be able to turn from the edge of collapse. And the only way to ensure that we don't end up with such a future is that if we convince our leaders, our politicians who have pledged to protect us, to take action and make decisions for us, the people, and not for profit. And the way to do that is, for me, you can do so much by creating awareness, of course, but it's the your physical movement that matters. You need to come out to protest, you need to raise your voice, because your voice matters in the end. And even if you think it's the smallest thing, it's not, because in the end, everything you do has an effect.
Right. Thank you, Ashir. So Anjali, my question to you is, does this current discourse is in context with India and South Asia? And if not, then how can we contextualize it? How can we make it our own?
I would say that it has started getting there. And I think in general, if you look at the environmental discourse, there has been conversation around the environment for many, many years. Many of our thinkers have written about the environment, have written about social issues, and it has not been highlighted as an environmental issue. So whatever they have written is not taken as a way of looking at the environmental issue, because they write it from a social perspective. But I think to really contextualize it to India, to the South Asian context, it's important to understand that it's so interwoven with all of our different social structures, all of our political structures, economic structures, and we need to look at it from that perspective. So I think among youth, at least, the movement is now becoming more contextualized. I see a lot of groups, a lot of people working to bring out local knowledge into the discourse, to work in different languages, to pick up local issues and talk about the social reasons behind it, the political reasons behind it. And it's very important because, of course, the climate movement was so wonderfully started by so many young people in the West, and it has moved to India, and it is really lovely to see that. But it's important to integrate it with the existing social movements and environment movements that have been there in India for a long time. So even if you look at the farmers' movements that are happening, they're also very much environmental movements, and it's very important that we actually connect those. So I think in terms of how to do this, it's very much, I think, talking to more people and listening, understanding that we are not always, coming from a position of privilege, and it's very likely that we don't actually understand a lot of what is happening. It's from an academic point of view that we're looking at things. So to talk to people and to listen, I think that's mainly one of the biggest things. Then to never underestimate what I think someone else is saying, or what their knowledge is, or where they're coming from. They may not follow the typical scientific method that we so call, someone who's an expert, but that doesn't mean that they know any less. In fact, they may know way more, but from an intuitive perspective, because they've been doing it for decades now. And to not discount that. And lastly, to just understand that I think if we don't contextualize this issue, we're not going to end up solving it. Because the entire issue with today's discourse is that we're trying to scale up everything. That's the problem right now. We're trying to scale up everything. And if we try to scale up our solution, that's again not going to address the actual issue. So we need to localize the solution as well. And to localize the solution, you have to understand the local. So I think that it's happening. It's definitely happening, and it's really lovely to see the shift happening. Hopefully, it gets picked up more and more, and we all start talking about it.
Yes,
I
right.
completely agree with Anjali. I just wanted to add, she touched upon the topic of intersectionality, and I feel that it plays such a huge role in environmental activism because though all of us will be affected by the climate change and environmental degradation, there are always few communities that are more prone to it and will have it sooner and much more severe consequences, from indigenous people to people with less economic advantages. These people are more vulnerable to this change, and we need to consider this when we talk about climate action, because that's something the East, I feel, at the global South and the East doesn't actually consider that much, though we should be considering it more than the West because it's more prominent in these areas.
Right, right. I agree, yes. Thank you, Ashir. So, Aditya, you have been campaigning about plastic pollution and you had a very successful campaign. So, how has your journey been like? And when did you start and why did you start?
See, single-use plastic has emerged as one of the biggest environmental challenges for our planet. It's cheap, it's useful, it's ubiquitous, and it's unfortunately very deadly. The fact that it's non-biodegradable and is recycled in very small quantities means that our planet is, with the passage of time, ultimately becoming a big dumping ground for single-use plastic. Plastic outlives us by many years, many thousands of years actually, and end up blocking our waterways, choking animals, harming plant life. And if these chemicals enter the human body, then they can severely damage the human nervous system and other organs. So our first step, so in my campaign, as a first step, we requested the food and cinema chains to stop using single-use plastic. Most agreed, and those who did not agree to stop using single-use plastic, like for example Burger King and PVR cinemas, were made to undertake that they will stop using single-use plastic through social media campaigns and public protests. Thereafter, we sort of approached the e-commerce companies like Amazon and Flipkart, and even pet bottling companies like Coke, Pepsi, Himalayan, etc. And we requested them to stop generating plastic waste. Since we only received vague responses from these companies, so we approached the National Green Tribunal against them. The NGT has, via an order, directed the Central Pollution Control Board to conduct an environmental audit of all these companies, and has also directed the CPCB to recover compensation from these companies in accordance with the principle of polluter pays. We have also filed a similar complaint against top 50 plastic producers with the CPCB, including dairy, food delivery companies, FMCG, and we are hoping to get similar direction against them very soon. The great news now is that the CPCB has actually accepted our position and has issued a closure notice to Flipkart and Patanjali, and the show call notice to all the above companies for recovery of environmental compensation. And it has also, in addition, directed the state pollution notices and a notice for environmental compensation to all other brands and companies in the states which are not complying with plastic waste management rules. So now we are very hopeful that the creation of plastic waste will be greatly curtailed if we are able to ensure that these actions are in fact implemented, which is really big.
Congratulations, Aditya. That's great news.
Congratulate us. That is just amazing, amazing work. And it's so really heartening to hear because it's been such a big issue for so long.
So yeah, that's great. So Ashir, when he was talking about protest, you come from Fridays for Future India. So how did this movement come to India and how was the first protest like?
So I think, as everyone knows, Fridays for Future is a movement that was started by Greta Thunberg, who was a 16-year-old teen from Sweden, and it's grown into a movement that now involves millions all around the world. India first joined Fridays for Future on 15th March 2019, which was last year. And we've participated in every strike since then. But I'll talk about the one which was in Delhi because I was there. It took place on 15 March last year. It took place in Connaught Place. And we were very apprehensive about this protest because it was during the final exams and for some board exams, and college students were also going through their finals. So we weren't sure how many people would turn up, but it was so inspiring, even though at the start it was slow. Children started coming at 12:30 right after giving the exam. Students started flooding in, and the turnout was great for the first time. And seeing so many people there inspired me personally also. And since Indian culture actually doesn't allow us to skip school and bunk school just like that, you need the parents' permission, and then you need school permission and everything. We actually involved the schools and started collaborating. And I learned during that protest was that when you call yourself an environmental activist, you're automatically regarded as anti-nationalist and anti-development. And that's something which was really heartbreaking for me, because we're not anti-development, we're not anti-nationalists. But how can you consider India a developed country when 1.7 million people are dying from air pollution, when a significant number of people are being affected by the toxic chemicals being released from the waste, where so many people are suffering because of it? And demanding justice for this is I don't even know how to put it. Demanding is so natural, because once you realize the severity of the situation, it's impossible not to take action. At least that's what happened for me. And recently, due to the unforeseen circumstances, also known as COVID, we've changed our methods. We want to keep social distancing, adhere to the regulations, and take safety precautions. So we've taken up to digital strikes, and that's something we've been doing for the past few months. I urge everyone to attend digital strikes. It's a unique experience, and it's something I never thought I'd be experiencing, but it's really, really interesting. And I hope this goes a long way, because for India, which is one of the most polluted countries in the whole world, even though our participation is a lot, we need more. We need more people to come out, more people to understand and realize how important this is.
Yes, I agree. So when you talk about digital strikes, could you tell us how we can do it? Because I for one have not joined one, so I would really know how we could do it.
It's actually on Zoom. We've conducted a few in the last few months. There's a Zoom link that is, we try circulating as much as you can, and then people join through that. And you can stay at home with a poster, or you can, go out near a park or near a significant monument or something like that, and speak about why you're here, what you're demanding, and ask and learn from each other. The most important thing is learning from each other. And other than that, also you can digital activism is so much more. Also, you can go to webinars, you can start pages, you can attend Instagram lives where people talk about stuff, and doing small things. Even if you go out, you'll see so much that's wrong, and starting petitions. This is the perfect opportunity to do something like that. Every one of us is stuck home. Our lives have changed, and adapting to this is adapting to social media, and there's so much scope with that. And I know being young in such a broken world is actually really suffocating. You don't know if you have a future, you don't know what it's going to be. So but the only way to change that is if we do our own bit, if we try making a better world, because we're the ones who can change it in the end.
Right. So, Anjali, what is your thought, and I mean, what do you think is going to change the discourse in India if EIA 2020 gets implemented? What is your opinion on the Environmental Impact Assessment Act 2020?
I think there's a lot of issues with the EIA draft 2020. If you look at the way it's been, so basically it's the environment impact assessment, and it's implemented anytime a development project needs to be is being put up somewhere. And what it ideally should be doing on paper, at least, is taking into account people's voices, people's opinions, people's concerns, and especially in the local area where that development project is going to be set up. Now, this hasn't been done for the past several decades already, despite there being an EIA process. There's always been an issue with implementation. But what is happening now is that things that were earlier illegal, so people could at least contest them in the court, are now being made legal. So post facto approval, where industries can set up and then and then get an EIA or get an environmental clearance, and reducing public participation, removing it altogether for several industries, allowing some industries clearance, which are heavily toxic industries, clearance without an environmental impact assessment. It's quite disturbing, honestly, just to see the scale. And it was very interesting in an interview with the minister itself. He said that the EIA is to help industrialization, is to help businesses. And there is this constant, if you look at there's been many rebuttal arguments ever since there was a huge campaign, and it's still ongoing, but there was a huge surge in the campaign around from June to August, where a lot of students, a lot of environmental groups, a lot of people from many different sectors came together for a very large digital campaign, actually, mostly a digital campaign. And Aditya is also here, there's a Satyagraha also, there was many things that had happened. And if you look at some of the rebuttals that have come across after that, there's this sort of dichotomy that many people are creating between saying, well, the EIA, something like the EIA is going to give us jobs, it's for the youth's future, and saying that, well, okay, we are still doing a little bit of environmental protection. But I think it's important to see that it's not a dichotomy. It cannot continue to be a dichotomy between environment and economy. It just will not sustain in the future. And young people don't just care about jobs. If you look at India, livelihoods is what we need to be looking at. What is the quality of that job? What are they actually doing? And culturally, socially, what is the impact of all of these things that are being implemented? I think when we look at just the the economy, who is it really for at the end of the day? I think that's a question that we really need to ask, which the EIA just does not address. And if you look at the rebuttals, they just do not address who is the profit going to, who is the surplus going to. The people are not in control of it at all. Who is this model, benefiting at the end of the day? And it's not the people. So the economy is kind of using the entire society as a slave to work towards something, right? Whereas it should really be, the economy should really be a tool for the betterment of lives of people, for the betterment of all of these things. And there's the argument that the money will help, but at what cost? It's exploiting so many more people for the benefit of a few people. So those few visible people are improving their livelihoods. But if you look at the general public that is invisible, that is really not improving. So I think there's a very strong dichotomy here that's very important to address. And even going forward, when we look at solutions to this, or when we look at, any alternative policies, any alternative solutions, anything, it's very important to just recognize that who is benefiting from it, what is the cost of implementing something, what is the true reason for the issue. So to actually dig down to the roots and understand what the issue is. Is it a structural issue? It is probably an intersectional issue combining many different things in society, and we need to bring those together to come up with something. And that at the end of the day, it is very troubling to see the way the government handle the EIA entire protest and the way that they're writing back about it. It is quite disturbing to know that our ability to actually protest and express our dissent is being curbed also. And young people are, getting detained, they're getting terrorist brands. It is very, very scary to just see that this is happening. So I would just say that this is a very big unwillingness on the part of the government. Sure, we'll develop and increase our GDP in the next few years maybe, but it's going to go down very soon, and economy is also going to go down. It can't sustain without a balance over here. So
Right.
yeah, we need to start looking at it from a connected point of view. They're not two separate entities that need to grow at, that even firstly need to grow. I think that itself is a huge issue in our paradigm, you know, that we need to constantly grow, but that they are separate. That's also something we need to address.
I agree. Yes. Thank you, Anjali. Since we're talking about bills, Aditya, tell us about the climate change bill which you want to present in front of the parliament.
Yeah. So see, climate change is killing us, and it will make us extinct sooner or later. Decades of ruthless exploitation of the planet and the environment has now resulted in a situation that nature is now hitting back, and it's hitting back hard. The rising number of instances of violent weather phenomena, forest fires, extinction of species, droughts, flooding, melting ice caps, rising sea levels are just warning bells of the Armageddon that is just waiting for us around the corner. The climate scientists have an almost unanimous view that to avoid the calamity, we need to restrict the rise in temperature to below 1.5 to 2 degrees over the pre-industrial levels. And for this purpose, it is very imperative that the world becomes carbon neutral by 2050. The Paris Agreement 2016, which called upon its member states to make all efforts to limit the temperature to below 2 degrees centigrade. Many countries have already enacted climate change laws which bind these countries to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. Unfortunately, India still doesn't have any consolidated climate change law, and environmental issues and emission standards are governed by executive policies, which are declared from time to time. These policies are often victims of the vagaries of electoral politics and patronage, and more often than not, they end up serving causes other than that of the betterment of the environment. So, we have formulated a draft on the Indian Climate Change Act 2020, which, in my opinion, will help in ensuring that India is able to meet its commitments under the Paris Agreement and will be able to limit the rise in temperature to less than 2 degrees C. The draft Climate Change Act contains a declaration of India's binding commitment to attain carbon neutrality by 2050 and also to reduce the emission level to 50% by 2030. This act envisages the creation of a autonomous climate change commission, which is to be headed by no less than a former Chief Justice of India to ensure that the stature, the clout, and the neutrality of the commission, and it would contain a majority of environmental experts so that the policies and decisions of the committee are driven by those who have knowledge about the environment and have some idea of the ground situation. The first function will be to obviously to assess how the existing laws, regulations, emission levels, and policies would need to be amended, and like which new laws, regulations, and norms would have to be legislated in a way so that as to enable us to achieve the 50% emission reduction levels and to achieve climate neutrality by 2050. It will formulate, the Commission will also formulate and recommend binding measures, including legislative measures, which are to be taken by the central and the state government for fulfilling the commitment under that. And it will be saddled with the responsibility to carry out a kind of annual assessment to ensure that India remains on the trajectory of achieving its climate neutrality target. And in case the Commission feels any additional measures are required to be taken, then it will be empowered to direct mid-course correction. We were actually planning to introduce it as a private member's bill in the monsoon season, but were not able to do so as the private member business was cancelled. So now we'll have to try to introduce it in the winter season.
Oh, Aditya, it sounds great. All the best to this
Thank you.
bill. Sounds really great. Yes. So, Anjali, when we are, talking about landfills and pollution, we know that the mainstream sanitary pads which we are using are non-biodegradable. They are filling up landfills and they are releasing toxic chemicals when they are decomposing. So, do you think menstrual cups is the way forward? What is your opinion on that?
Yeah, definitely. I don't want to say just menstrual, I think menstrual cups and cloth pads are both the way forward, simply because you can't standardize again one product to everyone. Every menstruator's body is very different. But when you look at, for example, so in India, you have since the amount of garbage, so one menstruator in their lifetime uses around 9,000 to 12,000 sanitary napkins in their entire life. That is a lot of trash. That is a lot of trash, and all of this goes to landfills. It sits there, it just rots, and it's leaking into our water, it's leaking into our soil, and it eventually comes back to our own bodies. It also has a lot of chemicals. There's bleach, there's just an n number, there's so many metals, zinc, mercury. It's really scary. Lead in these sanitary napkins, and they are going into our bodies directly and staying there for a long time. And when you look at something like a menstrual cup, there's an idea that sustainable menstrual products are only for the privileged or for menstruators living in the city. And this is absolutely not true. And I think it's high time that we break out of this idea that sustainability is for the privileged. The way it is constructed today, yes, I think it is constructed keeping in mind the privileged. But that needs to change. We have to make it more accessible, because if you look at, so in India especially, many of the practices that have been going on since a long time are actually quite sustainable. It's just that because of many societal structures that have now been put in place and taboos that have been put in place, they are no longer healthy or no longer viable. For example, cloth. It has been used for a long, long time, but because now of the social taboos, menstruators are too scared to dry it out in the sun. It's not considered okay, right? So it's not about going and then giving that menstruator a sanitary napkin and telling them to use that. That is adding another issue to them, where they now have to figure out how to dispose this. Most cities in India don't have enough incinerators to burn medical waste, let alone sanitary waste. And even if you burn it, all of the chemicals go to the air. So how do they dispose it? Many just leave it lying around in the house. I was talking to my Didi, and she was talking about how the sanitary napkins that she uses, her children end up picking them up and stuff because she doesn't know where to put them. And it's common in a lot of places. You know, how do you dispose of something like this? And they're expensive. They cost between 7 to 12 rupees per pad. It's very expensive in India to buy menstrual products. And if you look at it from that perspective, then going and giving people who are using dirty cloth sanitary napkins is not at all empowering them, because now they are dependent on this product and they're harming the body and their already existing environment that's there. So menstrual cups and I think cloth pads are a very good way to do two things. One is definitely to reduce the garbage, but two, also to address the societal taboos that exist around it. Because to use a menstrual cup, to be comfortable with your own body and your own blood. And I think this is a conversation that is always amazingly beautiful to have with people. Like when I talk to them, we usually talk about how this would have been a casing for a baby, and childbirth is so beautiful. So how could the blood be bad? And it's really amazing to just see the kind of different answers we get to this idea. So it addresses two things simultaneously. And again, with cloth, it's not about saying don't use cloth, but about saying how do you responsibly use the cloth, and how to actually maybe create a product that would help menstruators feel more comfortable. So now you have cloth pads which open up like a napkin and they feel more comfortable. And that's one step towards helping them be more comfortable with their bodies and whatever they're using. So I think definitely these are way forwards. So financially, it makes a lot of sense. There are great companies out there today. Health-wise, it makes a lot of sense, and environmentally, definitely it makes a lot of sense. So like just talking a little bit more, working with people to understand the issue and actually address it, and spending time like in smaller groups talking about it. I think that will really help to bring this to a more mainstream audience.
Locals to adapt to the practice, right? I agree. So when you're talking about pollution, Aditya, what is your view on the air pollution in Delhi? And have you done anything about that issue?
See, so air pollution is a very big issue in India right now and worldwide as well. For example, a recent study actually indicated that last year, air pollution caused around 1.67 million deaths in India alone. And it's the leading cause of infant deaths in India right now. So I believe that air pollution is a crisis which needs to be resolved soon. The right to breathe is an integral part of our fundamental right to life, which is enshrined in Article 21 of the Constitution of India. The fundamental right is being violated by the failure of the union and the state governments, and to keep the and they're unable to keep the air pollution levels in Delhi NCR below hazardous levels every year. Delhi is one of the most polluted cities of the world, and throughout the year, the air quality remains bad. But during winter, the AQI levels of Delhi NCR rise to hazardous levels. The only additional causes for air pollution actually during this period is stubble burning. The other causes like vehicular pollution, industrial pollution, etc. remain present throughout the year. So some role is obviously being played by wind patterns, but stubble burning also has a major role in this. As per the CPCB, on 1st November 2019, 44% of air pollution in Delhi was caused due to stubble burning. Throughout winter, it hovered around 25%. This year, its contribution to air pollution is actually around 18% already today, as per SUFFER, which is a government app. Last year, the AQI levels reached unprecedented highs, and the citizens of Delhi had to suffer various respiratory, ophthalmic, and dermatological diseases. Many of them even lost their lives. So, a primary reason for the stubble burning and ultimately the air pollution is that the small and marginal farmers are not in the financial position so as to purchase and rent out their stubble removal machines, and they do not have the window to remove the plant residue manually. So they're left with no option but to burn the same in their fields. The only solution to this problem is to ensure that the government reimburses the cost of stubble removal, which is incurred by the farmers, as otherwise the stubble will continue to be burned. This year, we had hoped that the government will take preemptive steps to ensure that stubble burning does not take place. However, no such steps were taken like every year. This year, the situation is actually even more complicated than last year, as the cumulative effect of high AQI and the COVID-19 pandemic may be very hazardous for the citizens. Studies from Harvard University, Cochin University, Louisiana State University, and Italy have shown that the spread and impact of COVID-19 is actually exponentially is actually exponentially enhanced with rise in air pollution levels. And therefore, air pollution levels have to be controlled at any cost. So we had no option but to approach the Supreme Court so that the life and the health of the millions of citizens of Delhi NCR are protected from the air pollution emergency. The Supreme Court has accepted our plea on 16th October 2020 and has adopted a one-man commission headed by Justice Madan Lokar to monitor and control the stubble burning and other causes of air pollution this year. We are hoping that Justice Lokar, who is very experienced in handling environmental issues, will be able to find a permanent and comprehensive solution to this critical issue. Hopefully.
We would hope to. Thank you, Aditya. Okay, it was so great talking to all three of you all. I believe and I hope that everyone's inspired by you all at the end of this interview. You all are doing so much to, mitigate the consequences of the environmental damage which we all are causing. So thank you so much, Aditya. Your plans are excellent. All the very best to you. And Anjali and Ashwin, you guys are so informative and you all are so courageous and you all are doing so much for us. So thank you so much. And I think it is the duty of everyone to, contribute and take part in protests and petitions. And I hope everyone does at some time for sure. So thank you so much for being a part of this interview. And I hope to see you again sometime. We should have such webinars more often now. So yes, thank you guys. Thank you so much for
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Very
It was good.